Welcome, everybody. I see we have some new people here. We have a hands up thing if you need to talk, if you're not used to it, or just raise your hand, make some kind of noise. But there's a feature on here where you can lift your hand. And we're basically going to talk about basically getting into bees, new beekeepers. This is the time of the year you should already have ordered your bees. And if you're going to order bees, packages, it's best to start with two. That way, if you install your packages and one hive gets weak, you can rob some things from one hive to put into the other hive. And the next thing is you need to decide, your size of frames, your size of boxes. If you have any kind of physical restraints, maybe go 8 frame or 5 frame. But that's one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is the size and capabilities. Things if you want to sell bees, backyard beekeeping or making honey or doing this as a business or a sideline. You have to decide before you start buying a lot of stuff. And don't buy everything that's in the catalog. Buy what you actually need. So leaving at that point there, there's probably a lot of new people here. I know we had 2 apprentices at the place here today, and they was doing a terrific job painting boxes. And I just as soon have people trade out work for classes and stuff because it benefits us both. If you have questions on what you need or what you're going to buy or how to go about getting started, that's what we basically going to talk about tonight. Or when no one else has got any questions, we'll think of something to ask. So who wants to go first with their questions?
Looks like Craig is up first. Go ahead, Craig.
How you doing, y'all? My first night here.
Good, welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Don, I've been watching your videos on YouTube, and I'm more of a dinosaur. I'm kind of a younger guy, but I normally don't use YouTube, different things like that. So I've actually kind of discovered a lot on there, especially what you've been sharing. But I run about 15, 20 hives. I mostly catch swarms, and that's about it. I do a lot of bee removing over the years. But either way, my question is that on your video on how you make queens, I know you make queens really easy, and you seem like you do it so much a day. I'm not really into doing that too much, so I don't want to do it the wrong way. But if looking at your video, if I would make a queenless hive out of one of my nukes with a frame of brood and all the bells and whistles like that, the young larva, if I would go in 14 days after I made that, would that be the correct timing as to place those into another hive, into a split?
Well, how many hives are you trying to make, and what's the time frame, and how much equipment do you have right now?
Well, I've got round about I run deep 10 frame deeps, and I've got maybe 20 nukes that's about ready to go. Some 4 frame, some 5 frame. I could just need to build more, and that's about it. But I'd like to get up to try and be about 100 by the end of the year. And I saw one of your posts before that you told somebody you can get from 500 to 1,000 very simply, but I'm not going to be able to build quick enough for that. I'm only one person.
That's why I'm asking how you want to go about this and how many boxes you have now. I don't suggest pulling a queen out and making queens that way, because the minute you pull a queen out of a hive and let them go ahead and make their own cells, you not only lose honey production, you lose bee population at the same time. You're much better off if you remember the basic things. Bees do 2 things. They multiply, they store honey. Instead of running 10 frame boxes, put most of those bees into a 5 frame box or build a 8 frame box and put them into an 8 frame and keep them in a single, feed them. Going back to the basic things, no matter how you look at it and how you phrase it, bees only do 2 things. They multiply, they store honey. And if you keep them in a single, they're going to keep bringing honey in. They're going to keep producing bees, making a population. When they get crowded, they make queen cells. That hive by itself, each frame in the springtime can run 20 to 25 queen cells per frame, And on an 8-frame box, you're going to have about 5 frames with queen cells. Now, the next thing is, if you're running plastic, that you're going to have to build queen castles, or you're going to have to make some queen cell protectors. That's why I run wood and wax.
That's what I run to.
All right, if you run 25 cells on there, more than likely, you're going to be able to cut out with a sharp steak knife, at least half of them. That's 12. And if you're lucky, you can cut 25 out, depending on how they space them. But springtime bees will have a habit of making twins and triplets. So you cut them out as a group, as a plug, and then you put them in with a frame of honey and shake some bees in there. Now, if you go back the way a lot of people are doing, they put a frame of honey, a frame of young larvae in there, and some extra brood. If the weather turns cold on you, the bees are going to cluster up, and everything on outside that cluster is going to get a chill brood. You're going to lose it. But if you let the bees make the cell, you can go out with a frame of honey, shake some bees in there, and about 2 cups of bees. You only need enough bees to keep that cell either warm or cool. If it's hot weather, they keep it cool. If it's really cold, they keep it warm. You are risking very few resources, and you are gaining ground really fast. You don't lose that production. Those queens are still laying in that box because you don't pull it out.
So
That's the smartest way.
So you're saying don't take it out of a nuke?
Well, you can put them in a nuke with the queen to crowd them. But here's the thing, what happens. If you do a backyard split, you have a 10-frame hive and you split it in 2. Now, one side's got a queen and the other side doesn't.
Yeah.
You've got enough bees to set up mini nukes, at least 30 of them. Or if you're going to do 5-frame splits, you've got a minimum to do 5 or 6 splits. And if only half of them come back, you're way ahead. Now, that queen has to fly out to mate. If she doesn't return on a 10-frame hive, you could lose 3 pounds of bees.
Yeah.
That's the things you have to think about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
I hope that helped answer your question.
Yeah, I've got a couple other ones, but I'm going to let somebody else go for right now. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, Don, my question was pretty much what Craig was saying. Right now I have 9 hives. I want to go up to about 30, 40, but what I want to do is I want to split some of my 10 frames, but I don't think I want to make an artificial swarm. I'd rather just split them and buy queens. This way I don't have to wait for the queen to fly out and mate. Would you go that route?
Well, that has good ideas there. I mean, if you want to make honey and you want to make a lot of hives, and if you got the money to buy the queens, you don't risk that queen flying out. You don't risk her being bred with some inferior bees that come back you can't work. You don't lose production. The disadvantage of that thing is you got to put money out for queens. I try to teach you to, if you got 2 to 4 hives, you should never have to buy bees again. Take care of them, multiply them, split them out. The only reason you would buy more bees is to change the genetics of it. If you got hot bees, you want to get better bees, or for that type of reason.
Well, I would like to crowd at least 1 nuke and see how many swarm cells I can come up with, and do a few splits with putting some cells in a few nukes. But I'd much rather get my 10-frame hives going with queens that I mated queens.
That's a good way to do it. Instead of buying a lot of stuff, experiment. That's how you learn. There's nobody there going to hold your hand and say, do it this way, do it that way. That's what I'm doing these chats for, is to help save you time and money and frustration. Because most new beekeepers, there's so much information out there, the mind is just plain flooded. So I'm trying to save you time and energy.
I just have one other quick question. On the nuke that I lost, the bees didn't starve, but a lot of the bees were in the cells.
Mm-hmm.
Now I just stuck those in the freezer. If I put that in a hive, will the bees clean those dead bees out?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because I tried to pick them out, but it wasn't working.
Well, if you let them sit out for a day or two and they don't have a lot of moisture on them, you can turn the frame sideways and you could take your hive tool and tap, gently on the sidebar, and the vibration will get a good majority amount. But bees, as long as you put them on a bottom board where you got enough opening there that the bees, they'll drag them out and they'll clean it. They'll even clean up a moldy frame. I've seen them do that.
And
Wax moth, I don't like to put wax moth back in a hive.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Mhm.
But getting back to the split, and so you're saying in a split you should run regular wax foundation, not plastic, so you can cut the cells out.
Well, that basically you can do it with plastic, but that was one of the reasons I ended up building queen castles, because if you can't cut, and I have tried in many years past that if you're really careful, you might cut 1 out of 10 to save it. But if you nick that cell or cut the back side of it out, trying to take a thin bladed knife, they don't work out. So we come up with a queen castle. You can take the whole frame, stick it in a queen castle. You have 4 entrances facing in opposite ways. If you stay on your timing, go in there and pull it out one day, maybe the queen's hatched out, leave those bees in there, take the frame, move it to a new space or another queen castle. It's another way to make queens without doing a whole lot of work. It's not the most productive, but it will work.
Now, would you also recommend, if you're cutting queen cells, would you just put 1 cell or would you put 2 in just to play it safe?
Well, there's a lot of ways to think about that, but usually you can look at a queen cell, and if you're not sure, you can hold them up to the sunlight with your finger on the top and the bottom, and you can see the queen moving in there. Another way we do here, and I try to show my students, stick it into your ear. You can hear the queen in there scratching, or sometimes a light beeping noise. I've tried 2 cells, but most of the time a single cell, if you can hear the queen or see it moving, does better than 2, because if they both hatch at the same time, they could be fighting and you lose them both.
Yeah. All right. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
James has a question. He's got a cold though, so he wanted me to ask it. He says he made 10 splits today. I'm getting queen cells Monday. I'm in Gainesville, Florida. Bees are bringing in pollen, and all my hives are full of drones and drone cells. Did I split too early?
No, as long as you got drone cells and you got drones, you got enough, they're going to make. And in Florida, yes, they've been doing them for 6 weeks already.
Does that answer your question, James?
Yes, thank you very much.
And James is new tonight as well.
Good. Welcome all your new people.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Al. Go ahead, Al.
Hi, Don.
Hey.
With the weather the way it has been, we're having temperatures in the daytime in the upper 40s and at night in the low 20s. I took my hives today, and a few of them are getting pretty light on their food, and so I need to add some food to them. What do you think is the best way to be able to add food considering the temperature swings?
If you got enough bees covering at least 2.5 frames, a hive top feeder, if you got the honey, I would feed them honey. If you don't have honey, mix up a thick syrup.
Okay.
At least a 2-to-1 right now, because you don't want to put a lot of moisture in the hive.
It's okay to leave it on at night, even with the low temperatures?
Yeah, because they're going to cluster up, and as long as you got a hive top feeder. Now, if you're using a jar feeder that has too many holes in it, if it loses the vacuum, you're going to end up drowning bees and causing a moisture problem.
No, I have your style hive top feeder, so.
Yeah, you should be all right. If worst comes to worst, an emergency way is if you have honey, put it into one of those little squeeze bears, turn the frame sideways and sprinkle some in or squirt it in and stick it up next to the cluster. That'll help hold them for a few days.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Okay.
Next up is Israel. Go ahead, Iz. No volume. Can't hear you. Nothing.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so I'm dealing with something new. I got my first dead out, and I'm not sure what to do with all of the frames that are in there, or if I even want to use them. Well, what is your thoughts on that?
You got more hives? Bees are flying where you're at right now, aren't they?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I got plenty of hives, but this is the first one that I've ever experienced. And on this dead out that I got was actually not my bees. This was from a swarm that somebody had me go and get. It was the only swarm that I actually went and got last year. And lo and behold, they died in there, but there's still lots of honey in there. And when I checked, what I did is I blocked off the entrance so no other bees could go in there, because I'm not sure what I want to do with if I just want to burn it or I want to use it. I mean, I don't know.
Well, here's the thing. It was your equipment and you caught a swarm, right?
Yes, sir.
Next thing you want to look at is the comb draw it out good. If you got good developed cells, they're not stretched out as good worker cells. Even if you got dead bees, I mean, you could put 1 to 2 frames in another hive and they'll use those resources. Now, if it was just from dying out from starvation now, if it was a swarm that died because maybe it had pesticide, I wouldn't use them. But more than likely, if it's your equipment and it's probably starvation, I would put them in another hive. If
Yeah,
the cells look good.
I'm not so sure that it's starvation because there was still, I don't know, maybe 10 to 15 frames of honey in there. And they weren't packed in the cell like,
When did you put the swarm in the box?
well,
October?
No. Yeah, it was, probably July.
Did you do at least 3 or 4 mite treatments on them?
Yes, yeah. On that apiary right there that I got, that one is a treated apiary, so everything got treated, so that I had good bees going into the winter. And so, I mean, I just don't know. I mean, I don't
think I would worry about them. If it's a lot of drone combing there and it's wood and wax, I would melt it down if it was stretched out and you had a discrepancy there. But if you think it had poison in it, then I wouldn't use it. But it sounds like they had mite problems. You didn't get mites treated.
Yeah, and that's because I actually have that Provap acylic acid treater, right? And all the other the other hundreds of hives that I got, I don't have any dead outs, and this is the only one that's a swarm that I brought in, and it did this, and so it's making me leery about wanting to use it or not wanting to use the stuff. I was thinking I just want to burn it, but I don't know if I do or don't.
I don't think you would have to burn it. If you got a swarm, it could have been the queen might not have mated well. They just wasn't a good bunch of bees. But with as many beehives as you run, one, I mean, I'd mount that on the wall. I mean, most people would love that.
Yeah, it's concerning though.
Well, not really on one hive. I mean, I wouldn't worry about it myself.
Okay, well.
And your equipment probably ain't even a year old on that equipment.
No. Everything in there was put in there in the summer, so they drew out all that wax and stuff like that. And like I said, there's probably still 15 frames of honey in there.
Yeah. I'd go ahead and use it, even if you put 1 frame in each box, and let them clean it out and use the honey.
Okay. All right.
I would do it here.
All right. That was my question. I guess if you do it, then I'll do it. And
I'll do it.
Okay. I trust you. That's for sure. You ain't led me wrong yet. That's one thing I know.
Okay. Let's see. Next up is Regina. Go ahead. Oh, I can't unmute you. You got to do it on your end. And nope.
She got her mute thing on.
Yeah, I can't do it from this end. It's an iPhone.
Sometimes it takes a little bit to get used to the way this chat's set up. So we bear with all of our new members.
And their video's down now too. Okay, we'll come back. Wayne, go ahead, Wayne.
Hello, Don.
Hey.
I got a quick question for you. I've been watching some of your videos you've been putting up recently, and in particular the Provap 110.
Right.
that you just received. I know you haven't tested it or played with it or done a video on it. My one thing I wanted to say was a tip. I've watched a couple videos on that. You know those white plastic caps that go on the cup?
Right.
People use them by putting them upside down on the top of the hive, put the OA in it, and then push it down on and flip it before they go in. That way it seals the OA fumes in.
Right.
Just a trick. Why are you looking at the ProVap 110 versus the OA unit that you have for sale on your website that you've done videos on and used?
The hand wand is 100%. I like it. I love it. I mean, the only problem is the ProVac, you can do 2 a minute. And the other one, there's a heat up time and there's a cooling down time. So time is money. And I've already got at least 4 of my students that are using it, and they got a couple of videos. Jerry Conway, he's got one up from North Carolina. And my time is worth something. We go out to a bee yard and you've got 50, 75 hives there. If I can knock all them out in an hour's time, why wouldn't I? I mean, it's basically putting the same product in the hive, except it's just faster. I just wish I would have invented the thing.
Yeah, I was just curious. So it is purely just a ease of use and efficiency aspect that you're looking at.
Yes.
I
think, well, now this is my opinion. I'm teaching students here. So if I'm doing hives in my out yards, we don't get the burning of the bottom of the frame. With the hand wand, if you're not paying attention, those units get hot, and at the bottom of your frame, they get this black scorch mark. Now, I can probably say right now, with that ProVac, you're drilling a hole in the back of the hive, and you're shooting it in, so you have no hot metal coming in contact with your wood. And if you're selling nukes, sometimes that little thing there, a person looks at it, well, that's a damaged frame, So there's another thing to look at. Other than the speed, I've got one unit here. Like I say, I haven't used it, but my students have. I will use it and probably end up buying another. But I will buy about 3 or 4 extra of those white domes, because I can have a student going ahead of me, 3 or 4 hives, and just putting the material in there, and another student can come right behind as fast as they can move down that line. When you're doing hundreds of hives, you can't spend days in one yard. You got to keep on moving.
Okay.
Joe May wanted to add something to that, I believe. Go ahead, Joe.
No, I'm just using the ProVape by myself. I can do 50 hives an hour. That's about what it runs.
Yeah.
Okay.
So very.
That's why, I'm going that way. I'm all for saving money. I'm all for being cheap. But when you're out in a bee yard and you waste 2 hours treating the hives where you could treat them less, you can be doing something more beneficial.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. Yeah. Just wanted to ask the question.
Yeah.
So.
But as you know, I've got several products here that, I have got, and I have tested a little bit with the decapper. There was people posting on my page there that you can't use natural drawed comb. Well, I had some here and I did it. And the only thing that I see is older comb, which was some brood comb. It had that darker comb. You had to run it through twice. But natural drawed comb, the biggest thing that people are slinging it out, it's not the uncapper. It's the electric extractors. Now, I run mine with no motor, and I turn mine one way. When I see the honey slinging against the side, at that point, I let it coast down and I reverse direction. I do that maybe 7 or 8 times. I can get natural drawed comb just about as dry as anybody with electric motor. It takes a little longer, but where you want to spend your money at? Buying plastic, or by taking your time and extracting.
Okay. I'll let it move on to someone else. I'm sure I'll come up with something else.
All right. Then we're going to try Regina again. Go ahead. No, still nothing. Thought he had it working. Nothing.
Maybe she can type in the question there.
Yeah, if you want to type the question, I'll ask it for you.
Some people get on and they get a little bashful because they're on live. So, we're here to help one another out. So if you got a question, you might think it might be dumb, ask it. I've done a lot of dumb things in my life.
All right, next up is Ernest. Go ahead, Ernest. And yours isn't working either. No audio.
Everybody's saving electric.
All right. Craig, go ahead.
Going back to what I was saying about queens, Mr. Don, if you don't know exactly how old the queen cell is, can you put it in a hive when it's maybe a couple days before hatching? Or does it have to be a day or two, right on top of it, do you think?
If you're careful, and I mean careful how you handle your queen's cells, about 3 days, 4 days after they're capped, you could handle them and put them in one. But another way, when you look at a queen cell, it'll usually be a brownish color and it's lighter at the ends. That's an indication within 24, 48 hours it's going to come out. So you can put it up or you can hold it to the light.
And when you're cutting them out, if you just cut the cell out like you normally do with your little knife, when you smash them between the frames, you always want the queen cell pointing down, correct?
Right. Always put it down. And you don't want to smash it in there. I try to show students up at the honey band, usually 2 inches below the top bar. If you take your thumb and just push in the honey, just a little bit, set the cell against the place where you got the indentation, slide the next frame to it, and just take the cell and just barely lift it up and down. Make sure you got enough drag on it that it's not going to fall. Because if you just got it barely set in there, when the bees come up, they'll cluster on that, and if there are enough bees hang on it, they can pull it down. That's why I show people how to have that little bit of a drag where bees do hang on it, it's going to stay fastened.
Yeah. Well, I'm down here in New Orleans pretty much, and our summers get pretty hot. I see a lot of your people are up north, and you're talking about negative temperatures and 30-degree weather for quite some time. I don't have that. I have problems sweating out in a bee suit after 10 minutes of putting it on.
I don't basically wear a bee suit. I used to work South Georgia, 20 miles from the Florida line. You get used to working your bees, but down there and where you're at, I would suggest drilling a hole in every box. Now, we run a 1 1/8 inch hole in the back with a screen over it on the boxes, one in the front, plus the bottom board. And we don't run screen bottom, we run a full open bottom. Now, our mating nukes, we run reducers in those.
Okay. I thought about putting a drill hole in my boxes, but that was actually another question I was thinking about asking, because I do not run inner covers. All I have is telescoping covers.
Right. Well, now, you can run a migratory lid. In fact, I know one fellow that cuts his lids exact size as his box. But he uses a brick or he uses a rock on top. And once they sit there for a week or two, they get enough propolis on. It's just he's running so many hives. He says by not making a migratory lid or a telescoping lid, it basically goes back to time. He saves a few minutes here and a few minutes there, and it adds up at the end of the day.
Well, what's the difference between a migratory and a telescoping lid? I mean, I've seen both. I use telescoping lids. I make my own. But what's the big difference as to why use one and not another?
Well, if you're going to use a telescoping lid, for me, if you're using plywood, it holds it down flatter, and the migratory lid is flush. If you got if you got a 10-frame box, they're 16 1/4 flush. That way, when you set them against another box, you set 4 hives there. If you're using a telescoping lid, you're losing 1.5 inches per hive. So when you add up 10 hives, that means one more stack of bees you can't put on the trailer or the truck.
I got you. I don't have that problem. I keep mine in my place, and I put them maybe 6, 8 inches, 10 inches apart from each other. And it's not a confined space thing for me. So it really doesn't matter what top you use. It's
whatever's convenient for you, but the basic reason the migratory is people move their bees. That's the main thing.
Yeah, I don't really move mine. I'm just looking to really try and get from my 15 hives to 20 hives as I have. I may have 10 of them that's honey producers with honey supers on them. Well, not right now, but about to be on them. And the other ones are nukes, and I'm just looking to get bigger. You know, I'm looking to try and get about 100.
If you want to get numbers, you can do what you want to do. You know, I'm just going to give you advice. I've run 10 frame hives for many years. 40 years, I switched to 8. And it was hard for me to do that. I actually set 1 yard up and run 25 10s and 25 8s. The 8s will outproduce the 10s. They build them up. They draw the frames all the way out. The 10 frame, you got to keep reversing outside frames. And it's a heavy box to work. If you got a lot of 10 frame boxes, my thing is don't cut them down. Get a router, put a 1/4 inch slot down the middle. Put your piece of like a 1/4 inch paneling in there and make sure it comes clear to the top of the box, up above your frame rest. That way you isolate it. Put a hole in one side on the back side and one in the front on the other side. And then you got to use a solid piece of paneling or plywood on the bottom. Now, if you don't like that, that gives you 2 nukes right away, fast, without spending nothing. If you don't like it, you can pull the panel out, go back to its 10 frame box. But if you get in there with a saw and try cutting 2 inches off or 3 inches, you booger them up so bad they look bad.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Regina wrote in her message for you, Don. So, how do I check if my bees are alive in this cold weather? I am in New Jersey. Because if they are dead, I need to buy bees. But if they're alive, I don't want to buy bees because I won't have space for them. In the fall, they were not doing well. I tried treating for mites, but one of my small hives died entirely, and the other 2 were 8% infestation. I used the patties to treat over 2 weeks.
What type of treatment did she use? Did she say?
We still can't hear you. You got to type it.
Well, if she's talking about if the bees are alive, the easiest way is to go and put your ear up against the hive and knock on it. The bees will hum or they'll vibrate or they make noise in there. Or, you know, you can even look at the entrance. The entrance should be at least 3 inches open. You should see melted snow in the front of the entrance.
Does that answer your question? Okay. All right. Ernest, do you have your microphone back?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes,
we hear
can.
you.
Yeah, the fella that had the bees to die out, we were just sitting here thinking that, you know, the alcohol wash, of course, you wouldn't have to use alcohol. The bees are dead, but he could eliminate where it was mites if he got a bunch of them and put them in the thing like alcohol wash and shake it up and see how many mites is on it. What do you think about that, Don?
Well, if they've been dead for any period of time, they might not even have mites on them anymore. And then it's another thing, you don't even know if they died from the mites. We're just assuming that. But from what he's explaining to me, I wouldn't worry too much. I would use the frame myself.
Okay, yeah, I was just thinking about that. At least you could eliminate one thing.
If
You know,
you had a dead out on that, and you checked them close, you know, quick. If you had a dead out and within a week's time, you went out there and found it and checked them, you might find mites if you did an alcohol wash, but I wouldn't base it on that alone.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have for now.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to go to Israel next.
Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Yep, we hear you.
Okay. So my next question is, doing some kind of food to stimulate the queen. Do you think it's still too early in the season to get her to want to start laying, or not?
Well, that is a gamble. And where you live, if it was my bees, I wouldn't do it until at least the 3rd week into February. That's just me. Here, right now, this is the first part of February, and within a week to 10 days, our red maple should bloom. So that's usually my indication when I can start splitting in that. But you still are working against the weather. If you get a cold spell in there, the bees are going to cluster up.
Right. So what's the disadvantage of it? Basically, I just may lose some larvae, or does it set them back in time, as far if I try to start a little bit earlier?
I don't think it's going to set them back in time unless you get a cold. If it drops down below 55 where you're at, and that queen's already laid a big circle of eggs, the bees are going to cluster up. But if you got a box and you're covering all the frames really heavy, you could take a chance and feed it to them.
Yeah, I do got a couple. There's quite a few boxes out there that are they're hot. They're boiling with bees in there.
Well, now see, there's the exception now. You got really strong bees now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't use a pollen substitute myself. I would feed a honeybee healthy or an equivalent. I've got a brood builder recipe out there. I would do that. Now,
right.
I used to add a little of that Mega Bee to mine. I would put about, it's the large cottage cheese container, a 2-pound container. I would dip that in the Mega Bee and I would mix it really good into my feed, my sugar water, and my essential oils. That seems to do some good, but straight pollen in there, I don't know. You got to be careful on that.
Yeah, you think it might still be a little bit too early.
Yeah, I think you're trying to jump the gun too much. Wait another 3 weeks and you'll be happier.
Yeah, I am. I feel like I really let myself down last year and didn't go big enough, and I want to make sure that I can get to my 600 hive count this year, and so I'm really
going. What you've done in 1 year shows you know what you're doing and it's working. Now don't get overconfident.
Yeah, that's why I'm on the chats, making sure I get this right. So yeah, maybe I'll back off then. And I know all of your formulas, so yeah. But I was in there today and I did see some of them were boiling. I found that dead out, and that's what was making me think, well, can I get in here a little bit earlier? But I do expect, some nights we will, because I looked at my AccuWeather, and we're going to have some nights, that are, in the high 30 degrees. And so I wasn't sure.
Well, I'm not familiar actually with what is growing in your area, but a lot of people with the cold weather, they don't understand the way things run. I had 2 apprentices here. It was 28 degrees this morning, and they come and it wasn't even above freezing. And I went in my yard and picked up a couple dandelions, actually had open bloom on them right then, just to go to show you that's what you're visibly seeing. Now, I have moss that grows around riverbanks. I don't know what the temperature is. That stuff blooms, but each area is going to have a different foliage that's blooming, even in the wintertime.
Right. Yeah, maybe I'm just trying to go a little bit too hard. I don't know. I really am kind of getting a little bit anxious about everything, about getting rolling though, because seems like we're having a milder winter than we have had in the past, but I don't have any experience with bees this time of year, so I guess I better just listen to.
Well, don't get that spring fever, because I've seen many a year where I've had queens here mated and ready to sell March 1st. And I've seen, I done 1 year, I guess it was about 7-8 years ago. I've talked about it before. Usually, once you have good weather, it stays for a while. And we never have a freeze at Easter. I made 75 splits and they was doing good. And we had a record Easter freeze. I lost every one of them. Now, that's being honest with you. You make mistakes. So best to be a little bit more cautious. Wait until the weather stabilizes. Or if you have good, strong splits. Never split until you can afford to lose that split. That's the option you take.
Yeah, it's all money in the bank to me. I don't want to lose nothing. Losing the one to me was devastating.
Nobody wants to lose, but that's a good way to look at it. Do you want to take and make a split and run the risk of losing it? That's what the commercial beekeeping is. The people that want to take the risk, make the splits, weaker splits than anybody else, those are the people that are making money. The first ones out of the gate get the biggest prices.
Yeah, I know, and I did take some pretty risky maneuvers last year at the end of the season, but you know everything's. I mean, there's some pretty tough insects. I'll tell you that these girls are pretty tough. So, but I was thinking I might jump the gun though, but maybe I'll back off a little bit. But it's probably better that I do. I don't want to fail, but I do want to I want to get to that 600 mark by the end of
Well,
the year.
if they're that full and you're not doing nothing, just leave them alone. They're liable to surprise you. And they know more about the weather than the weather forecaster. And you go in there, you might pull out 4 or 5 frames and a bunch of cells. They make some splits. The
Right.
bees can tell you a lot more. They know what's going on more than we do.
Right. And I opened up quite a few today, and I actually did, maybe about 15, 16 of them. I actually pulled some frames down in the brood box just to see if I could find any larvae in any of them. And I didn't find any in any of them. So, you know, there wasn't no eggs and none of it down there. So.
Did they have polished cells yet?
Well, they were cleaned out down there. I mean, it was nice and clean, but I mean.
Do you know the difference between a polished cell and just an empty cell?
No.
You get the sun over your shoulder. We have good daylight. They'll look really shiny. They're polishing cells getting ready for the queen to lay. But if the bee's hatched out and they're not cleaning it, I mean, that you don't want to worry about.
Okay. Yeah. Well, like I said, I didn't see any larvae and I didn't see any drones. So maybe it's just still too early. But the weather's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, the weather's pretty good. I mean, like today it was 56 degrees here, you know, and we're constantly in the 50 degrees because we get a lot of rain, and so we got that cloud cover and it holds in the little bit of heat that we got.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, all right, Don, we'll let somebody else
go
for it.
All right, Jim, you're up. Go ahead. Jim.
He fell asleep. Jim, wake up. He's counting money. That's what he's doing.
I don't know what he's doing. Okay, we'll come back. Patricia.
Yeah, hello. I had a couple of things for Izzy. First of all, what is your marker in your area for spring? Because like Don said, red maple bloom for him. It's the same for us. I don't look for anything going on until the red maples bloom. So if you don't know what your spring marker is, ask your bee inspector, ask at the bee club. Somebody will know, and that'll give you at least a beginning idea, because spring fever hits all of us, but we're on the side of caution because dead bees are heartbreaking.
Yeah.
They're hard to sell.
Yeah, and so for us out here, Pat, I'm in the wild, wild west, so we don't even have a state apiarist. We do whatever we want. We can make skeps. I mean, whatever I want to do, I can do. But it's the same thing. We have our maple trees will be the first bloom that'll be out, and you know, that's kind of where one of the things between the brambles and the maples, that's kind of where I have a lot of my hives and a lot of the evergreen trees, because my bees need pollen, so that's where I got them. But there isn't anything out there.
Weeks after the maples bloom before I consider anything, because we'll get one year they'll bloom the first week of February, and the next year they'll bloom the third week of February. So if you get too quick, you're going to lose bees. And also, don't worry about your crowded hive, because those are the ones that are going to make your first queen cells. So just because it's got a full box of bees, don't panic.
Oh no, I'm not. No, and I like
spring fever. It's bad right now.
Yeah, no, and yeah, I may have a little bit. It's getting hot, I tell you that. But yeah, I know. I try to keep them girls compressed up. That's the way, you know. That's the way I've advertised. I grow natural queens. I don't do any of the grafting. Although I did do a lot of grafting last year to learn how to handle queens, but I just killed them all. But I don't sell any grafted queens or wouldn't give that to any of my customers. All of my queens are swarm queens. That's what I sell with my nucleuses, and that's the only kind of queens that I want. I only grafted just in case I had an emergency and I needed a queen, and that's how I learned myself on handling queens. I got a whole bunch of grafted queens and I started handling them, using them, but I killed them all so that way they weren't intermixed in any of my apiaries.
That breaks my heart that you killed queens. Don't do that again. Mail them to me.
I don't know. I just don't.
If you think you're really overcrowded, move the queen off to a 5-frame nuke and let that hive be queenless. If they're ready, they'll throw queen cells for you. So don't jump the gun too much. And the other thing is to print out or to write out the map and really understand how long it takes and what you're looking at in the hive, and take notes. You may not have started taking your own notes yet, but
oh no, my stuff is
valuable resource in years to come. Is on February 2nd, I had it bad. I had spring fever, and I talked to Don, and he said wait, and it was good because the next week it went down to 20 degrees. So those notes are going to pay off in a couple of years for you. So that's really valuable to really good notes.
Right, and I wholeheartedly believe that. I mean, I am well documented. I have the secretary out there taking notes on each hive that I have in my test apiary. I know exactly what's going on, and that's how I learned myself between Dawn and my notes and doing a whole bunch of experiments in the test apiary, doing some crazy stuff, just to see how how tough these girls really were, because I got a hive back there right now that has been queenless since August, and I didn't give any stores to for the winter, and lo and behold, they are still alive in there, making it. And so
they're going to get tired of your mess.
and that's the reason why I run the test apiary is I have quite a few different tests going on back there just to see what can and can't be done. I don't try to get it all out of a book or not. I got some crazy stuff going on back there, but they really surprised me.
Remember too that if you do too much extreme stuff, the bees get disheartened and they'll give up and leave that hive because you're just putting them under too much stress repeatedly. So if you practice on this one in the spring, give them the summer as a break before you practice again, because they get disheartened and they just give up and they'll leave if you give them too much stress. And the stress could be from what you've done, or it could be from mites, or it could be from whatever stress factors in the hive. So be careful you make them unhappy.
And some of them, and these are all, I guess what I would say expendable to me. There's 20 colonies back there, and it's a test apiary, and I got some that are treatment free. I got some that I'm using different kind of treatments for. I got some that I'm putting under a lot of stress, but every one of them is expendable to me. That's how I learn. You know what I mean? This isn't a yard that I sell from. It's completely separate from the actual business sense of it, because I need to learn this stuff.
Yeah,
well, experimentation is how I basically learned everything. In fact, there's a lot of people say, why you buy this or why you buy that? The latest thing that I've got here that I'm going to do a study on, and I'm going to do 25 hives, and the only way I'm going to treat them is with that thermal unit. And you plug it up, and of course it takes an hour, a little over an hour for it, but it builds up heat to a point that it kills the mites in the cells. Now, I have not used it yet, but I'm going to put it to use, and I'm going to give my report now. Some people might not like what they hear, but I'm going to tell you the way it is.
What's the cost on that?
It's like $500 or $600, but if you got, say, a half a dozen or a dozen hives, and you don't want to put oxalic acid, you don't want to do anything else except the most natural way to treat them, it might be an option for you. But on a commercial scale, I don't see that it was going to be a big seller. The biggest thing I see right now in my future is I might end up buying 2 or 3 ProVaps, because we got enough yards that we can do 3 different yards at 3 different locations all at the same time. With, the unit is basically pennies compared to what a nuke costs. I mean, you do a hand one and you run over 100 hives, it takes a long time to do it. So If you're running 600 hives, 2 or 3 of those units, it might be time-wise that you could, see the way to do it.
Yeah, but then I have to trust somebody to be there with me. And the only people that know about my apiaries and where I'm at is me. And that's, I don't trust anybody because I don't trust people. So I do run the ProVap and I've been using it, and whatever it takes me to get through all of my hives is what it's going to take me. But all of my locations, except for my test apiary, they're top secret to me. I don't let anybody know where that stuff's at because I don't trust nobody out there.
Well, when you get into teaching beekeeping and stuff like that, you'll be surprised. There's a lot of people want to go commercial and don't have enough money. So one thing to think about it is you wouldn't go out and cash a bunch of checks, put it in your wallet and give it to your assistant and say, hold this for me and I'll be back to get it in a few hours.
Right.
And hope for the best. So you put the temptation out there. This day and age, it's not a good idea. So you have a good idea there. I mean, that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, no, nobody knows. I don't tell even my best friends. I mean, I just don't let those locations go. They know where my test apiary is at. What'd you say?
Are you making moonshine? You don't.
No. I know everybody was kind of kicked up on that sugar, and that brings me to another thing. I mean, there's a huge investment out there, not just in my sugar bill, but in my woodenware, and it's not.
I wonder if we couldn't move along. Israel, it seems you're dominating the conversation here.
I'm sorry. Okay, we can move. Let's move along.
That's a little rude, Dan. Let's everybody gets a chance to ask questions. All right, Anthony, you are up next.
Right. I noticed one of my hives, the population is way down. Like they're pretty much down to one frame. They're not even a whole frame. The queen is still there because the queen's mine. I think it got robbed out. The frame's on the outside. There's no honey. They're picked out. So I don't know what happened. I'm down on population. I got 5 hives. They're about a foot apart. If I stick other bees in there from another box, are they going to stay in there?
If your population has dropped that much, having them that close together does not affect it. I think what you got is you might have a mite problem that you're not noticing. Population is dropping, your queen is slowing down. That is usually the biggest thing. As far as your hives, if you got an entrance reducer in there, they should defend that hive. If they get sick, they're not going to defend it. They could have a virus. If you're checking for mites and you're not seeing mites, you might have a virus in there.
Okay.
Because right now where you live, your population should be building.
And that's just something that I just don't understand. 3 of these I've had since last April, and they've never really filled up the bottom box.
Well, I remember you said you changed your queens out.
Yeah,
sometimes, I mentioned that too. We had 2 apprentices here today, and I try to reference things that is going to be pertinent to what they're doing. And I told the one fella, I said, now, if there was a place in Gainesville there where you could buy a motor, you drove your car here, but they had a sale on these motors, $500, would you do it? And he just said no. So if you got a queen and she's laying, why would you replace the queen? That's my whole thing. Queens don't do their best until going on their 2nd year. And right away, if the queen starts to fail just a little bit, you're not looking at viruses or other things that could be happening.
Yeah, well, when I got these nukes last April, I had no idea how old the queens were. And then after 6 months or so, they just weren't doing anything. And that's why I changed them, because I didn't know how old they were. So I put the new queens in there. But right now, still I don't see anything going on. And we should be in honey flow right now. But it looks to me like it's 6 weeks late, because things just aren't blooming 6 weeks ago. They're beginning to bloom now.
I
So
would
maybe-
take a sample of your bees and I would send them off and have them check them. Also, I would cut a 1 to 2 inch square of the comb that you're using. These nukes that you bought, was they inspected for disease and stuff before you bought them?
No, for those, there's some new people here. Many of you know I'm in Thailand, so no, these were not inspected to my knowledge.
Well,
And
see, there might be your problem. You might have bought sick bees and they're going down. Now, see, when you mention that, that brings up the people that go out there and they put terramycin or tylosin in their hive. They do it on a regular basis. That's like cutting your leg off to prevent getting gangrene. When you keep putting antibiotics in a hive, they get resistant. Now, you can cover up foul brood with it. It won't show up unless you do an actual test on it. But the bees look healthy. You take them home or a customer buys them, and then they steadily go downhill. That's why whether people buy bees from me or not, I mean, they'll come and argue about price. I tell them what to look for. Get a health certificate. Make sure those bees have been checked. Make sure you're not, and don't buy used equipment. Buy new stuff or build it.
Yeah, it's just this 1 out of 5. And my strongest hive that really does have a lot of bees in it is also one of the 3 that I got.
Well, see, the whole problem that you have there, if you got one that has any type of communicable disease, it's going to be transferred from one hive to the next just from the mere fact that they're robbing one another. That's the thing that you have to watch.
Okay.
But in your place, what you have is you have a state place there. Cut a 1 or a 2 inch square of the comb, and then take at least 100 bees, put them in some alcohol or dry, whatever they ask for. Send them off and have them analyzed. That's going to tell you what you have. Then you can know where you're going from.
That I can do. I have a connection in entomology here.
Yeah.
All right, it's getting late. We still got several hands up. I want to let the other people ask their questions. Go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, back to Craig. Go ahead.
Like I was saying, Don, I'm in New Orleans, and I noticed you don't wear a bee suit a lot of the times, for the most part.
I can't afford
it. I don't see how you or anybody else does that. I guess when my bees see me, they see a fat guy that can't run too well, and they like a good target. But I was thinking about getting the Pro Breeze bee suit. Have you heard about whether that's good or not, or where I can find it?
My son, he bought a bee suit because we have some of our bee yards that we shake bees, and we run double deeps or triple deeps, and we use those for shaking bees. He bought a bee suit. I think he got it from Man Lake, and I'm not here to promote anybody's bee suit. And he let me put it on, and it feels like it's a double or a triple wall suit, and it has a good elastic on the bottom, and it's actually really cool. He uses it in the summertime when he's shaking bees over there. You might check on that. When it comes to a bee suit, get one that's going to be comfortable. I just personally, I don't have one. I don't use one. Even when we shake bees, I've shook bees here in front of students, and I don't wear a bee suit.
I don't see how that's possible.
Well, bees can smell fear on you, and if you're afraid you're going to get stung, you can be up in my carport, and I could have 25 students and shake bees 400 yards from the carport here. And if you're afraid you're going to get stung, I guarantee you they'll fly up and find you.
Yeah, I found that to be true for the most part. I'm not really too afraid, I guess you say, but I've had a lot of stings, and I never think about going into a hive without a suit on. It's just my personal experience.
You have to work what you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to stay out of the cotton for the most part because when I'm going into my beehives in the springtime and summertime here in New Orleans, it's like the surface of the sun. It gets 95, 96 degrees, and then you want to put a cotton jacket on for a couple hours. It doesn't work out too well.
Sometimes, as far as bees stinging you, it can be the crop that you're either pollinating or making honey on. And the only time I've ever had to wear a bee suit, and I borrowed it, is when we ran bees into the orange groves. They're okay when you put them on the orange, but when you pull the supers off and you pull bees out of the orange, you have to have duct tape on your ankles, your wrists, gloves, and then you got to clean your mask when you're done. That's how many bees. I mean, it's just something about it. the orange. That's all I can say.
We have a lot of orange and citrus, and not too far away from me is Plaquemines Parish, and that's where all of our citrus and everything else comes from. That's that's just like getting bees from you. That's who you are. That's what they do. So yeah, I'm just trying to figure out exactly what's the next suit to buy without spending $300 or $400 that I see that some of these prices.
I don't know what the suit cost them. I really didn't, give them that much of a thing there. But buy a suit that, other people recommend. The best person to ask is someone who wears one. You're asking the wrong person for, recommendations. Birthday suit would be fine, I mean.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. The one last question. When you're baiting a hive, I saw your video of how to bait a hive with what's the name of it? Lemongrass oil. I've got some in, and I've seen many things about don't put too much.
Right.
I've seen like 2 or 3 drops, and that's fine. I've never baited a hive with anything like that. I've just put some old comb in and wish them well, hope for the best.
No, see, if you use old comb, if you don't get a swarm within 10 days, what do you think's going to happen?
You start to get a little bit of wax moth, but I don't have
a little bit. You'll have that box solid full of wax moth. But if you take brand new comb or new foundation and put it in your frames, even if it's a starter strip, and you can put it out there, you won't get wax moth. I guarantee it. Now, what I do is take a bottle of lemongrass oil and take a Q-tip. It's a little cotton swab like, and just get it saturated and rub you a circle around the bait hive. And just leave that Q-tip in the bottom and have about a 1-inch hole, or you can get by with a 3/4, but a 1-inch hole is usually works good. And I put a migratory top on there and I staple it on with 5 frames with starter strips. And when it's full of bees, I move it. And I use a French wedge. I don't know if you've seen that video.
Yes,
I can walk up, pull that hive off if it's full of bees, and put another one in its place in less than 5 seconds.
Yeah. Well, so
the quickest way.
So just put it all around the inside of the hive, correct?
Right. Just put a circle. Just go about halfway down in the box and just make a circle around the side of the box and leave it in there. Don't dip it twice. One time, that's all you need.
Okay. Thank you.
It's good for a season.
Really? I've heard to do it every 2 weeks.
Hey, there's a lot of people who tell you a lot of things. If I was in the lemongrass sales, I'd like to hear that too.
Yeah, well, that's why I like to go to one person and one person only, because I've found that anytime you ask somebody a question in this profession or business, if you ask 5 people, you'll get back 1,000 answers from people that ain't even got a clue.
Well, if you want to do, small scale stuff, you can get different opinions and stuff. But if you want to make money at something, find somebody who's doing it that's making money or it's successful. There's some people can do more honey than anybody else, but yet they don't know how to make splits. There's people that can make all kind of splits and don't worry about honey. Each person has got a specialty.
Yeah, well, I believe I'm talking to that person now.
I don't know. I'm repeating what works and what don't work.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for your input.
Okay. Let's see. Next up, we have Matt. Go ahead, Matt.
I guess I'd like to mention I'm in Plaquemine, Craig. So I'm pretty close to you. And I think Don was talking about suits. I purchased a ventilated suit, and I've been very happy with it from, I think it was Glory Bee, and it was only $150. So don't look at spending more than about that much if you're looking for a full ventilated suit. And what I'll say about that is that they're pretty thick, so you won't get stung through it like you will with through a cotton suit. So I just wanted to mention that, if that helps.
Okay.
Craig, do you have I'm sorry, Don. I didn't mean to interrupt, but it looks like Craig may have wanted to say something.
Go ahead, Craig.
No, that's fine. I was just telling you thank you. I didn't want to butt into anything. I appreciate it.
Okay, I just wanted to add that, and we had a really hot hive this past summer, and we ended up getting my wife a ventilated suit also because she was getting stung through the suit. So we really like those suits.
We finally got a winter down here. I hope the summer isn't as bad. We don't get too much winter where we're at.
No. And actually, Don, I wanted to ask you about that. And I guess that's been mentioned. We need to know what the, I guess what's in bloom here to determine, when the flow starts and everything. But for our area, when do you think we should be looking at putting these swarm traps out?
Well, you have to go, I'm not familiar with your area, like you say there, but look at what's blooming. It might take you 2 years to 3 years to find out when blooming in your season, and you're cold. You want to make splits. You don't want to get it where it's, too cold down below 55. Watch your honey flows. There's a lot of things there to tell about it.
Okay. Well, I guess that's all I had. Thank you.
All right. Scott, you're up next. Go ahead.
Oh, hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, we hear you.
All right. Hey, Don. Hey, quick question. I went into one of my hives a couple weeks ago, and it's boiling with bees. However, when I opened it, it had that queenless roar, and didn't see the queen, and I did see a lot of shotgun drone. So what I'm wondering is,
drones or workers?
Look, it was drone cone. But it had that. I went into 3 or 4 of my other hives, and they were pretty quiet, real docile. But this one it had that distinct sound that sounded queenless. The question I have is, if I'm queenless this time of year, can I add it to a hive, or can I wait to get the queens? It's boiling with bees, so I would hate for that hive to die. What should I do with that hive if in fact it is queenless?
Well, my idea on this is I don't combine hives. When you combine a hive, you're backing up. You got a hive and you got bees in it. Now, as an insurance policy, I would go to one of the hives that's quiet, take one frame right out of the middle, shake the bees off, or make sure you don't have a queen on it. If you don't spot her, make sure, just shake all the bees off, put it in the center of the hive that's noisy, and take one of the outside frames, shake all them bees off, and replace it into the hive that you took that frame. Now, if you're queenless, they'll make them a queen cell. If they're not, you haven't caused nothing. But your hive could be noisy. You could have a lizard up underneath it. You could have something aggravating the bees to make them noisy.
Okay.
A scattered, buckshot looking drone cone, I wouldn't worry about that. That just could be stretched cells that they're not using or they had used.
Okay, because I went in and looked, and I didn't see any queen cells that were forming, and this was about 2 weeks ago, so I just didn't want to get into the laying workers.
This basically is a little early unless you live down below Florida or along the coast of Alabama or in Louisiana or South Texas. I wouldn't worry too much about it. I would just change frames out and wait about 10 days, go back in it, or 14 days.
Okay. Yeah, I'm in North Georgia, so one day it's 60 degrees, one day it's 30.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right. John Myers, go ahead.
Hey, Don.
Hey.
I was wondering what you make your lids out of, pine or Advantech, or what are you using?
I like Advantech. I mean, if someone brought me a load of plywood scrap, I would use it. But, Advantech is, basically it's going to lay flat. And the plywood, even if you bought brand new sheets right from the supply house and you cut them out, sometimes they'll lay flat for 6 months. I've seen them in 3 months start to curl up enough that a bee will get up under the lid, get in your feeders and start drowning. So Advantech, even without paint on it, will stay flat. That's just what I found, experience.
All right, thank you. That's all I had.
Okay.
All right, and let's see, over to Paul. Go ahead.
Don, on the day that I'm picking up my queen, should I make my splits that same day or the day before?
There's a lot of people do them a lot of ways. I'll take a bunch of queens out there and I'll make them queenless for, 5 minutes and put a queen in there. The minute you pull a queen out or make a split, they know right then there's no queen. If there's a queen walking in there and you make a split with another queen, you can, if you're not sure, leave the cork in both ends, but that tells you right then, if, you know, when you make it.
You close up the entrance on the split?
If I'm doing them in the same yard and they're weak splits or one frame splits, yeah, it's a good idea. Close them up, screen them up with a screen across there for 24 hours. Even you could leave them 3-4 days. Usually 24 hours, they reorient. 2 days, you know for sure they are. But, you know, when you're making splits and you make a good heavy split and you leave the entrance open, all you need is nurse bees. So if the frame has 50% worker bees, what are they going to do? They're going to fly back to the parent hive. They're just going to make more honey.
I just want to split my, because I'm running double deeps. I just want to take my double deeps and split them in half.
Well, and when you put a new queen in there, make sure where your queen is before you know.
Yeah.
I would leave them for a half an hour, let them get oriented, and then put the queen cage in there, put it between the frames. I would still leave them, you know, if you want to make honey, leave them closed up for a day because they're not going to starve. We've shipped nukes for 7 to 10 days in transit and they don't starve.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Don.
Okay.
Okay, then if there's no other questions, that should do it for tonight. Don, thank you. We'll see everybody in 2 weeks. Oh, wait a minute. James, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm gonna try.
Okay.
Those splits I made today, I put them in 3-frame boxes I made out of that Vantech. And I was wondering, I put a frame of brood and some honey. Is that brood gonna hatch out and be too many bees in there?
Where do you live?
I live in Gainesville, Florida.
Well, if you put a queen cell with them or you letting them make their own queen?
No, I got queen cells coming on Monday.
Why'd you make a split so early then?
Well, I have to work Monday.
If you made splits now without queen cells or a queen, by the time you put those queen cells that you bought in there, you know, they're going to have loads of queen cells in there already.
So then I can make more splits.
Build boxes.
I got hundreds of boxes. I've been building since I started only 2 years ago. I probably have 100 boxes laying around.
There's no need to make a hive queenless very long if you got queen cells you're going to put in. I would make them the day you get the queen cells. That's what I do.
Okay. I wasn't very sure. My buddy's
If you've
telling
got a
me-
lot of hives and you've got good strong ones, you could take a frame of honey and put a ripe queen cell in there and shake about a frame of bees in there and leave it open for, you know, open the entrance up, leave it open for at least 2 hours. Get some of the field bees to go back to the same hive they come out of. Because you don't need a lot of bees to take care of a queen cell. That way you maximize the amount of splits you make.
Because the guy that's helping me out, he said, because I don't have any other yard, he says those bees are going to fly back to the hive they came from. But I put a bunch of brood in, you know, a whole big sheet of brood in there. Those bees aren't going to fly back, are they? Because they don't know where they came from.
The nurse bees and some of the field bees are going to stay there on the brood. But even in Florida, a cool night, they're going to cluster.
Right.
And the outside of that cluster is going to get a little chill brood, and they're going to end up hauling out larvae.
Okay.
The one thing to think about is if you buy cells from somebody and they've got a good reputation for their cells, you don't need many bees. If you have a double deep, you can probably make 40 or 50 splits and let the field bees go back. All you need is enough nurse bees to take care of the cell, but reduce the entrance really low.
Yeah,
by 3/8. That's
I made a 3-frame Nook box out of that Vantech, so it's really small space.
Yeah.
So
well, when you mentioned that, here's one thing to think about. There's a lot of people just getting started. If you're going to make nuke boxes, make either 5-frame boxes or make an 8-frame. Don't come up with a 2-frame, a 3-frame. If you become allergic or for some reason you need to get out of bees, there's nobody out there going to buy oddball size stuff. So keep stuff standard. Now, if it's a 5-frame box, you don't have to put 5 frames in. You could put 1 frame in there. When the queen, you could add a frame to it or 2.
yeah, I just seen where you had been putting 1 or 2 or 3 frames in a box. So I was just going to use it to make queens. I only made 12 of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's
Queen
useful. The only problem you have when you make smaller boxes like that is they're not stable. A 2-frame box with a little wind will tip over a lot easier than a 5-frame box.
Right.
You know, it has pros and cons to it. The biggest thing I look at is people either get tired of what they're doing, or their wife makes them get rid of everything, or they get allergic to it and they have to sell this stuff.
Okay, so it's okay to have them in the same yard, though?
Why not?
I know I've done it, like this is my 2nd year, and every nook I've ever had that I made has stayed in my yard.
Yeah.
I lost about 8 of them though, but
I run mine on stands, and most of my stands run anywhere from 6 hives up their 5-frame nukes. I run 10 or 15 to a stand, and I make my stands, they're probably 5 foot apart or 5 foot from one row to the next. I've made splits, 3 or 4 splits off of one row, go back 5 foot and put those bees back there, and I don't have a problem.
okay. I haven't had a problem either. He just keeps telling me, "Oh, you're going to lose them." But
well,
I've
there's
had
one
good luck.
thing, if you remember something tonight. When you get other people in your bee yard, there's 3 people out there that's going to discourage you, and that's wouldn't, couldn't, and can't. Or I've always done it this way.
Thank you, Don.
Yep.
Okay, and that'll call it for tonight. We'll see everybody in 2 weeks. Thanks, Don. Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate everybody showing up. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Thanks, guys.